What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, so this is a video request that I received from my subscribers, and they wanted me to give my opinion on of the last three-peats that we've seen in NBA history. The last three, the Kobe and Shaq Lakers three-peat being the last one, and then of course the Bulls had two separate three-peats. 91, 92, 93, and then 96, 97, 98. He wanted me to give my opinion as to which one was, I guess, the easiest of the three, and then subsequently, which was the next easiest and which was the hardest, I guess. Oh, man. First of all, this is all relative because there's no such thing as an easy three-peat. Winning a championship is very difficult. You know what I'm saying? It involves concentration. It involves health. It involves so many different factors, including luck, to be honest with you. So to be able to win three championships in a row is something that's very rare. I mean, because outside of those three, we've only seen two other teams do it. The Minneapolis Lakers with George Mikan and Bill Russell Celtics. All right. So we're speaking in relative terms. So in my opinion, I think the Kobe Shaq Lakers three-peat was, in relative terms, the easiest of the three. And the main reason being that although the media liked to portray Kobe as the sidekick, and that's what the role they were trying to have him as, because Shaq was at his absolute apex at that point in time, like 99, 2000, 2001. If you really watched Kobe, he was a superstar in the making at that point. Like his ascendancy to superstar status was imminent. Whereas with a Scottie Pippen, even though he was a great player, we all knew that he only was going to be but so good. You know what I'm saying? Like Scottie Pippen in his prime was very good, but he was not, in my opinion, he never met superstar status. And some people call him superstar. I never saw him as a superstar. I saw Scottie as an all-star. Okay? Like, I think anybody who thinks that he is as good as Akeem Olajuwon or Darryl Robinson in his prime, I think they got nuts in their heads. You know what I'm saying? Like, literally, you have ball sacks in your head instead of a brain. But that's just me. So when you have a player like Kobe Bryant, as dynamic and as dominant and as vicious and an absolute killer like him. Plus, even though Shaq was comparatively lazier when it came to conditioning his, keeping himself in condition and in shape, when it came to his mindset, Shaq had that devious, nasty, bully mindset. So he was never going to be passive out there. So you got those two dudes out there on the court at the same time. When Shaq was motivated and in shape, Lord have mercy for the opposition. And another thing we got to point out too is the Eastern Conference was not at its strongest in the post-Jordan years. You know what I mean? Like it really wasn't. I would say the best team that they faced in the finals in those three-peats were probably the Pacers. And even then, I think almost all of us would agree that wasn't even the best Pacers team at that point. Like as far as that generation of team, the best Pacer team was the Bulls team. Was the '98 team that the Bulls faced in the conference finals. So, when you look at it, that next round, next year they played the Sixers, who, although Iverson had one hell of a run, I mean, did anybody really seriously think that the Sixers were going to beat the Lakers in the finals? And then the next year you had the Nets. I mean, let's be honest. Come on now. I mean, that wasn't even a competitive finals. So when you look at who were on those Lakers teams, because they were pretty loaded with great veteran talent. You know, Rick Fox, the first year, Glenn Rice, and Robert Ory, and Brian Shaw, and Horace Grant, you know, even though he was on the tail end of his career, and, you know, a lot of other good players at that point in time. You know what I mean? Um, Derek Fisher, of course, the Bulldog. Then, of course, Phil Jackson, one of the greatest, if not the greatest coach. He's definitely the greatest when it comes to winning. Uh, yeah. Then again, Phil Jackson was the coach of the Bulls, so during the 90s. But anyway, I have them as the easiest, relatively speaking. Number two, I would have the 96-98 championship as far as the next easiest. Not saying it was easy, but you can argue that the NBA was a little bit watered down. I never refute that. When people say that, you know, about that 90s decade, well, the second half was watered down. Sure. Now, when they say the entire 90s, I push back on that. No, the entire 90s was not watered down. But from 95 onward, yeah, it was watered down. You start seeing more and more first round picks being busts after the mid 90s. You did see further expansion of the NBA, right? Which means that there were more and more of the talent being spread out, spread thin, and it means also, excuse me, there were more teams for the best teams to kind of beat up on and pad their win totals. You started seeing a generational shift in the NBA. Many of the players who starred in the 80s were retiring, and some of these younger players, it was taking them a little bit longer to make the transition to the league and be great. You know what I'm saying? Because we started seeing more and more guys who were not NBA ready. So, yeah, there were some teams that the Bulls would kind of beat up on in the second three-peat that I noticed. You know, okay. Um, you know, there were some teams that would go out there and, you know, like the Dallas Mavericks. Well, one year they were like 11-71 or some shit like that. So that's what I'm getting at with that, right? Then the Toronto Raptors and the then Vancouver Grizzlies, they sucked for a couple of years, right? So that part. Next, the Bulls were deeper. Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen were aging. Michael Jordan's still the best player in the league, but he was a little bit closer to the pack. And, you know, Scottie was beginning to struggle with his health more. And in particular, because of the way the game had changed by the mid to late 90s, the bigs were becoming more athletic. You start seeing more Tim Duncans. You start seeing more Kevin Garnett's. You start seeing more not Xavier McDaniel, excuse me. What's his name? Antonio McDyess. You know, Chris Webber. You know what I'm saying? What's his name? Sharif Abdul-Rahim. Ben Wallace. You know, you start seeing more of these athletic bigs who had great wingspans and could cover more of the floor, and they were more versatile defensively. So this was making it more difficult for offensive players to score and get off good shots. So they were closing down the lanes and clogging up the lanes, and the pace of the game has slowed down. So guys who were getting a lot of their points via Julius Erving way, like, you know, transition and, you know, slash to the basket. That was kind of becoming slowed down. So if you didn't master your mid-range, or your jump shot, you struggled more to score. And unfortunately, that was one of the biggest. Scottie was one of the biggest victims of that. Scottie went from being a guy who could have some series where he's averaging 25 points a game to the point where if you watch Scottie Pippen play at that time in the 90s, from the Charlotte Hornets series in 94, the first round, that was the last series where he scored 30 points in the playoff game. Afterwards, he never scored 30 points for the Bulls ever again in the playoffs. And that was one of the reasons why he struggled. Right? So you had to have other guys who can knock down some shots. And that's why you had a Tony Kukoc. That's why the Bulls was one of the best 3-point shooting teams in the league. Because we had more 3-point specialists at that point in time. And, the bench was great and it was deep. And, that was a component that Michael Jordan didn't always enjoy during the first three-peat. He had more help. That's what I'm trying to get at. He didn't have to do everything by himself because he couldn't do everything by himself in the second three-peat. But man, if you watch the Bulls in his prime, he was really carrying that team a lot. I mean, he literally carried that team in the 93 finals. He carried them. I don't think the 98 Bulls could have beaten the 93 Suns. I don't think they could have beaten them. It took all of Michael Jordan's 41 points a game, 8 rebounds, and 6 assists for them to beat that Phoenix Suns squad. And Scottie Pippen's 21 points a game, wherever it was, too. You know what I'm saying? That first three-peat by the Bulls, I think, was a more difficult. You could make a strong argument that the Bulls easily could have lost to the Knicks 2 years in a row in 92 and 93. The Knicks surprisingly took them 7 games in 92. The Bulls were down 2-0 to the Knicks in 93. Many people thought that the Magic Johnson-led Lakers, Magic's experience and the experience of many of those players on that squad would be enough to vanquish the Bulls in 91. And the Eastern Conference, the NBA was very strong still in the 90s. You still had other teams that, at least in 92, 91 and 92, seemed like they were threats. 91, up until he got hurt again, the Celtics were the best team in the NBA for the first 30 games of that season. They were 29-5 at one point. The Pistons were still there. You know what I'm saying? Matter of fact, many people thought the Pistons were going to three-peat. So I would say out of the three, that was the more difficult championship of the three-peat, the 91, 92, and 93. And those Western Conference teams were very formidable. 92, of course, you had the Portland Trailblazers with Clyde Drexler, who was a leading MVP candidate. And in 93, you had the Phoenix Suns, who have the same or similar offensive rating to the 2017 Warriors. And guess who was MVP? Charles Barkley. So that's the way I would have it in order. And plus, in 91, you had the guy who was the reigning MVP, Magic Johnson, who won it in 90 narrowly over Charles Barkley. So that's how I would have it in order. But tell me what you guys think.